Hello, everybody. Junior Resource Investing back here again. My name is Matthew. I have Fathom Nickel with me today. This is what I'm excited for. Fathom Nickel is a Canadian junior nickel explorer with a couple of very exciting projects next door to each other in northern Saskatchewan. Joining me today is CEO and VP Exploration Ian Fraser. Ian, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Doing very well, Matthew. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell the story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be an exciting conversation. I like your company a lot. But before I'll hand it off to Ian here to kind of introduce us to his company for those of us who don't know it quite yet. But prior to that, very bog standard disclaimer here, please. Right, we are not your financial advisors. This is not investment advice. You'll have to make your own investing decisions with your financial advisor. But with that out of the way, Ian, why don't you just give us a classic elevator pitch for Fathom Nickel and what's going on with you folks these days?
All right. Fathom Nickel, private company formed originally in 2015. Myself and a colleague of mine, we formed the company, and we were private right up until the spring of 2021. There was a bit of nickel euphoria going on, and Elon Musk making statements about needing nickel in safe jurisdictions, and we'd wanted to go public since being formed as a private company, and then this window of opportunity presented itself, and we probably hit the market at the absolute peak, and we were able to raise a substantial amount of money, and since then have made tremendous strides as a public company. But the strategy of the company was, going back to 2015, we were looking at energy metals. We were entertaining some thoughts on graphite. We were entertaining, and we knew about we had a history of the Albert Lake project, the first project of Fathom, and it was a stranded asset. So we approached the company that we had both been involved with as consultants, and were able to secure what at the time was the Rottenstone project. We've since renamed it to the Albert Lake project. And from there, that was sort of the impetus going forward, is just being focused on nickel. And subsequent to that, we've added the second project, the Gochager Lake project, which is roughly 60 kilometers straight south of the Albert Lake project, center to center. And here too, tremendous upside for nickel.
So I'm already going off script here. So you said that you were kind of casting about looking for projects. How wide did you cast your net? Was this something that that Albert Lake Rottenstone, that you kind of had your eyes set on that from the get go, or is this a fairly detailed due diligence process that it was a result of?
I had previously done the due diligence on the Rottenstone project, and I was, this goes back to 1998, 1999, and I was tasked with looking for platinum group element opportunities globally for this company that I was working with. And so, as I said, globally, trying to find other, Marinsky reef analogs, Stillwater type things. And it was interesting that, right in our own backyard, essentially, this Rottenstone project, it was introduced to me by a colleague of mine, Dr. Larry Hulbert, who at the time was with the Geological Survey of Canada. And it caught my attention. It really did. Again, we were focused on platinum group elements at the time, and here was a former producing of 9 grams PGEs with very, very significant nickel. And so I presented this along with a few other projects to the company, and the Rottenstone project rose right to the top. So come 2015, knowing that this was a stranded asset, it was a very quick and pretty simple, straightforward negotiation, and it was ours for shares, and off we went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. And and fast forward to 2023, and things are looking very exciting. And I'll try to I'll try to be objective. I'm an objective interviewer here. But maybe one more question here. We touched on this at the end, and I realized, and I spoke to you off camera here, that not maybe we'll bookend this way, but do you just want to give us a quick, maybe just a overview of where are you now and what's coming down the pipeline short term, next year to 6 months?
Well, we feel very, very good about what we've accomplished since becoming a public company. We have moved the Albert Lake project. I like to call it Rottenstone. Which interesting history there. 1929, the Hill of Rottenstone. This is what First Nations folks referred to this as, and it was introduced then to some prospectors, and that's how I get asked this question quite a bit. Is where does the term Rottenstone come from? But anyway, so there you go. There's that little bit of history. We set out to prove that the isolated deposit, the historic Rottenstone deposit, was not something occurring in isolation. And we've done that. So, the first checkbox was proof of concept. We've been telling people that we just didn't believe it was there all by itself. It's part of a large magmatic system. We've done that. So that is moving ahead very, very positively. We've generated multiple additional targets. We have found a new zone, which is the proof of concept. So we feel very, very good about that. And we plan to be drilling there in the first quarter of 2024. The second project, Gochager Lake, we just passed our first year anniversary there. Historic deposit, non-compliant, drilled off in the late 60s. Very little work done since the 60s. But, here too, a little bit of history. I was involved with a group that was looking to option in on this project in 2017, 2018. So I did write a qualifying report for this company, and then we raised a bit of dough, and we drilled a couple of holes. And so I saw firsthand what this style of mineralization was all about. And it just struck me immediately that a borehole EM would be a fantastic tool at this particular setting. This style of mineralization had never been used before. So we had the opportunity to option in on this in the fall of 2022, which we did. And, the first drill hole that we drilled speaks for itself. When you're getting, 58 meters of 1.4% nickel, that does catch people's attention. But importantly, I think there it's demonstrating, we have an exploration thesis there that this disseminated deposit that was drilled off 1966 through 1970, they were drilling vertical holes. And I feel very strongly now that they were missing these higher grade chutes that are very steeply oriented and steeply plunging because they are drilling vertical holes. And so we feel we have moved that project forward significantly, and there's just a plethora of additional exploration targets within the 22,000 hectares that we now the project is now up to 22,000 hectares. So there's multiple additional targets in there. So we feel very good about what we've accomplished at Gochager Lake thus far. Move that forward significantly, and the fact that it is a historic resource, we'd like to very, very aggressively go at this in 2024 and potentially be talking about a maiden resource towards this time next year. If we have a sufficient amount of meterage to throw at it in 2024, I think we could be in that very position.
That's exciting. And yeah, you touched on a number of things that I'm looking forward to kind of chewing on here with you. But I mean, I think core of this, and this is what what attracts me to Fathom as an investment opportunity myself, is that you have that proof of concept, right? You mentioned it yourself that this is not a one, that the historic Rottenstone mine was not a one-off. It was it is one pod among many, right? I have a visualization here that I'll put up for people, right? But there's this mantle plume that comes up, and then all these little pods or magma chambers get filled over time, and you are in the middle of trying to understand how these things connect. And I think what you said just there was quite interesting, that the vertical that they're so steeply, the actual kind of targets are so steeply inclined that it's easy to miss historically, right? Because that's going to be a question I ask you later, and I think is always a natural question when you have these kind of brownfield exploration projects: is what are you going to do differently, right? But
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a pin in all that. I'm looking forward to that conversation. But let's just kind of get the more of that bog standard slide deck kind of content out of the way, because I think, for people that aren't new to the story, I think this is the kind of content that helps them structure their own understanding too, right? So, we're going to talk about share structure, insider ownership, these kind of like I say, kind of standard things here. But do you mind just right now, again, like kind of nice, neat little share structure? You IPO'd only in May of 2021, so not a lot of time to do some damage to the share structure yet in terms of dilution. But can you just tell us briefly, and I'll bring up visuals here, right? But shares outstanding, pro forma, right, and I guess the overhang, and then what is the overhang priced at necessarily?
Yeah, well, at the moment, we're just slightly over 100 million shares outstanding. Ownership, management ownership, we're roughly 6 to 8%. We'd like that to be significantly higher. And yeah, we were, I guess when we came out as in the IPO, we were engaged with a group, and Fathom Nickel at the time was a little bit desperate. We were having a difficult time raising money privately, and we had at the time a significant land package, and things were coming due, and so we did engage with a group, and we gave up a significant amount of the company to do that. And then we came out with the IPO, and it was priced at 70 cents. That's good or bad, depending on how you look at it. It certainly created a tremendous challenge. How do you maintain a 70-cent share price? And very quickly, the shine on the nickel market started going south, and us, along with our peers, were in decline. And we sort of fast forward to the winter of 2022. I might start jumping all over the place here, Matthew. Excuse me, but we this proof of concept at the Albert Lake project. I don't think we really got any love in the market for accomplishing what we did. We found this new zone of 300 plus meters nickel mineralization, and you look at the textures, the style of mineralization, and it's another Rottenstone over a 300-meter strike, but the overall metal tenor was lower, and that's geology. That's what happens. But nonetheless, it was a new discovery, and so we continued to drift as low as 4.5 cents towards the end of 2022, and we had picked up the Gochager Lake project. And again, if I can sort of tout my own horn here a little bit, just the 2 holes that I was involved with in 2018, and recognizing that mineralization, and recognizing where that mineralization occurred relative to a hole that was drilled in 1967 that had 9 meters of 2.4% nickel. I always thought we could drill a hole at the Gochager Lake project and probably do fairly well. So
maybe just to finish off this topic, so burn rate with and without drilling, I guess, right? And maybe more, well, I'll just start, yeah. So burn rate with and without drilling. Do you mind just kind of telling us through the kind of operation you guys are running?
Yeah, that's something that, Doug and I have spent quite a bit of time on, and we have reduced our monthly burn rate significantly. There was, we came out of the gate, again, we raised $11 million on the IPO. We had some arrangements that we've since got out of that were, costing us X number of dollars per month. And essentially, overhead wise, it's just we're a 2-man operation. We did have an office. We were able to get out of that lease. So we've been able to cut back on the burn rate there. So we've, I think there's still a bit more room to get it under. We're sort of in the 50,000 a month. That sound about right? Yeah, I guess so. It just seems like a large amount of money, but it's just the cost of being a public company is not cheap. But we're looking at ways to continue to reduce that. Drilling wise, yeah, we've had some expensive drill programs. The 2-hole program in February at the Gochager Lake. We didn't have a camp there. I'm working on amending our current exploration permit so that we can have a camp out there. So that eliminates the back and forth between the project and the village, the hamlet of Missinippi. Looking at ways of reducing our dependency on the helicopter. That is a real cash gobbler, and if we can, move drills from site to site over land on some kind of a track vehicle or some kind of a skid mounted drill. We get it in there initially probably by helicopter, but then we can move in a small track vehicle capable of pulling these things from site to site. That would reduce our overhead drilling costs substantially. And this can be done at both projects. Even at Albert Lake, as things progress there, we can pop in another track mounted vehicle and utilize the same sort of strategy there, is just to try and cut back on the dependency of the helicopter, which would have a tremendous effect on the overall cost per meter.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you are Saskatchewan. I'll bring up a map here again. I mean, you are pretty far north. Anybody knows that area? I mean, like Larange or Flin Flon down the road or whatever, but or not down the road, but just a little to the east. But yeah, you're not that far off a road. But I mean, that 5 kilometers or 50 kilometers, you're not getting very far when it's off when you're past the end of the highway, right? So it's pretty dense Muskeg, or it can get pretty dense up there. Just finally, so maybe Albert Lake, right? So we'll call Gochager kind of an aspirational thinking in terms of getting a camp established. But with the camp current operationally, what is it per meter at Albert Lake?
At Albert Lake, we've been in the sort of $500 to $600 a meter all in cost. So that is, inclusive there is the cost of the camp and all the aviation costs, and something to unlike gold exploration, say nickel exploration, you have to have borehole EM. You just absolutely have to have that tool at your disposal, because it's giving you real-time information. And where I'm going with this is, that comes at a cost. So you have to have a 2-person crew. And what I like to try and do is, when they are waiting for drill holes to be completed, what else can we do with the EM technology? So we'll try and get them out there on surface grids, but sometimes that's easier said than done, but it does add another component to our all-in drilling costs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, nickel exploration with respect to drilling might be a little bit more expensive because of some of the add-on costs, geophysical add-on costs.
Sure. No, thank you. So you've answered a couple of these. I wanted to just talk about kind of the origin story for Fathom. Like I said, you did kind of touch on this private company in 2015 taking it over. Rottenstone has a lot of really interesting history dating back to the 20s, 80s, and 90s, held by Claude Resources, which is another good Saskatchewan company, right? And then you spent that 6 years from 2015 to 2021. You did a lot of that kind of quote unquote boring, dirty work that is so essential to these sort of things, right? You built up a suite of drill targets, reassaying, old drill core. Could you just provide some color, right? We're going to focus obviously on the more exciting, the sexier kind of drill campaign stuff, but obviously you don't get there without all that background information that you've done. Do you just want to briefly discuss or touch on all the work that you went into that from kind of 2015 to 2021 to get this drill target ready?
Yeah, and that's something I'm actually quite passionate about that, because when I'd been working on that project, the Rottenstone project, 1998 through 2003, and there too, it was difficult times. It was difficult to raise money, and when money was raised, we just drilled. And in fact, it was amazing what we used to be able to do back in the day with a $500,000 budget. You could actually get quite a bit done. Though those days are long gone, but it always struck me that I was absolutely fascinated by the grade, and and a lot of the drill holes that we were drilling, you'd get these little, what we were calling apophyses of ultramafic rock. So you knew there was something going on. And we drilled a hole in the bay near to what was called the island showing, which was goes back to Inco had a go at this project. And we popped a hole into the bay, and we intersected some ultramafic rock, and some of it was weakly mineralized. And I was working on the next hole, and I was instructed to pack up and get out of there. And it was, I think it was about the second week of April. And then when I got back to town, I, inquired about what we're going to do with all the drill core that I had logged and sampled and had bagged. And they said, well, we're not going to assay any of it. And I went, really? And so I left somewhat frustrated and annoyed. But, circling back to 2015, I knew where this drill core was. It had been kept in storage. In fact, when we approached the company, they were surprised that it still existed, but I was the one that packed it away, so I knew it was still there. And the very first thing I did was, assay the drill core from that hole that was drilled in the bay near to Inco's island showing. And lo and behold, it was definitely ultramafic rock, and some of it was mineralized. And fast forwarding to 2021, I'll get back to that 2015 to 2021 period. But, fast forward to 2021, we're out there drilling a hole, and boom, we get into 13 meters of ultramafic rock. And it was everything that I had seen 1998 through 2003. It was by far the most significantly mineralized intercept that I'd ever seen at that particular project. So that was, we're off and running. But now to go back to the boring stuff, 2015 through, before coming public, there's a tremendous amount of data in the archives. And we were, going back and doing things like, I certainly had some help here. Dr. Hulbert helped me out here as well. We were taking mag surveys that were done over top of the historic Rottenstone deposit before it was exploited. We were taking gravity surveys over top of the Rottenstone deposit before it was exploited, and reprocessing this data and creating images and, essentially, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. What was this historic deposit? What did it look like? And it became very, very apparent that it had a very strong gravity signature. It had a mag signature, but that sometimes can be a little bit confusing and misleading. And sort of the missing bullet was, is it conductive? So, these were sort of the exercises that we were going through, is just trying to parcel this all together. And then going through a VTEM survey that was flown in 2008 by another operator that was operated there again. There was a hole drilled in 2008 out in the area of our new discovery, the Bay Island Trend. And the fellow that was logging the core had called it a chlorite schist. And there was like 5 to 7 meters of what he was calling a chlorite schist. And when I looked at the data, I thought, well, that doesn't look at all chloritic to me. That's an ultramafic rock. And again, I had asked for permission to get out there and look at this and sample it. And no, don't bother. It's not a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. So we, again, when we acquired all of this, we started assaying and resampling and relogging some of this historic drill core, and just started putting the pieces together and generating some additional targets. And one of them was, okay, well, how much of this Rottenstone deposit remains in the ground? And we've since proven that there is more of this mineralization that wasn't completely exploited. So it just gave us a time to think. If I can go off on another geologist rant here, when you're drilling, sometimes you don't have the ability to stop and think. So as a private company, we're able to, I think, maximize that historic data, and it set us up very, very well for the proof of concept.
Well, yeah, again, I'm going to be touching on something I mentioned already, but that is what I find so compelling, right? That this is not just hopes and dreams, and a little bit of a pump job, right? But this is extremely data driven. You've collected and collated, immense amounts, decades worth of data to create what I find to be very, it's realistic, and you are using past proven in the ground realities to go out and identify further targets, right? And none of this is theoretical. Well, of course it is until you're actually lancing it with a drill, but you have that proof of concept that you've mentioned a couple of times. So I'm going to introduce now, there's a technical report came out in 2021 with your IPO, right, on Albert Lake specifically, that I read through for advance, and you kind of told me off the top here that it's out of date in a positive way. So we'll get there. Tell me why I'm wrong here in a positive way in a couple of minutes. But I want to actually talk about your exploration thesis, because again, this is what makes the Fathom Nickel story for me, right? And so I'll do a little bit of reading. I've got a quote here from the technical report, and then I'll ask you just to kind of weigh in on how your understanding has evolved since this point. But fundamentally, you believe there are multiple pods similar to the original Rottenstone mine, right? They're connected together by sill pathways, and they're all sourced from the same mantle plume. So the quote from the technical report here, and it is abridged. If anybody really wants me to, it's on page 29. The Rottenstone deposit is unique. The contained precious metal content is higher grade than ores of most deposits of this type, and this will be emphasis my own visually. The high sulfide content of the ore in such a small ultramafic body is rare and is indicative of a much larger magma chamber, the source of the Rottenstone deposit. And then the abridged, moving on. To achieve the high nickel, copper, cobalt plus PGE grades, a direct result of the high sulfide content of the ore, the sulfides had to have the chance to equilibrate with a large volume of magma, enabling the sulfides to scavenge nickel, copper, cobalt, and PGEs. Again, emphasis my own here, but the inference, this is getting exciting, being the Rottenstone deposit is part of a large magmatic system. So, fundamentally, your thesis is it's a whole heck of a lot bigger than we previously understood. Is that still your standing thesis, or how has that evolved over the last couple of years since that technical report?
Well, that absolutely is the thesis. And the Bay Island trend, this 300 plus meters of ultramafic mineralization that's open at both ends, and we still haven't figured out how wide this thing is. That's proof of concept right there. That is, so that quote, going back to a technical report, I think originally 2018, and then we updated it for the IPO process. We accomplished that. That hasn't changed one iota. Yeah. So that again, I think that's a pat on the shoulder as far as what we set out to do.
Well, it has to be satisfying. I'm just asking you personally, like you say, you've been working this off and on for 25 years, seeing that confirmation and affirmation of, I can imagine you grumbling while you put those bags away 25 years ago. You get to come back and actually get to discover and prove your thesis, right? And so that's exciting. Maybe, and trying to keep our feet on the ground, because I don't like overt pumping, but how excited are you? Like, what's the blue sky potential for this land package? What are we looking at here potentially?
Well, we've set out. We believe that Saskatchewan and both these projects are potentially their own individual nickel camps. The Thompson Nickel Belt, it's the same age. The Manitoba has Thompson, the past producing Lynn Lake. You shoot across Hudson's Bay and you get into northern Quebec. Glencore's Raglan operations. This is all 1.8 billion. This is all Proterozoic timing, and the Trans-Hudson corridor it makes a sharp left-hand south turn when it gets into the province of Saskatchewan, and so the grades of the historic Rottenstone deposit speaks volumes all by itself. The up until our discovery of the Bay Island Trend, it was thought of as a one-off isolated deposit, and it clearly is not now. And to be able to that quote that you read where the sulfides have to get into the magma chamber and they have to cool chalcophile elements that are in there, the nickels, the coppers, the cobalts, the PGEs. If you don't have that interaction with the sulfur, this whole thing doesn't happen. And so, the conditions were unbelievably perfect for the Rottenstone deposit, and that's why we have 3.3% nickel and 9 grams platinum group elements. But again, in that quote, it's had to draw from a large magmatic system. These platinum group elements inside a magma are occurring in like 0.00000 something parts per billion. I mean, they're all just floating around in there. So if you can get that from that low number and you get it concentrated to 9 grams, the sulfur that's attached to these platinum group elements, the sulfur's in there, and the bigger the source, the more of these. I like using the Pac-Man mentality. If you can imagine these sulfurs in the magma just starving for PGEs, well, the bigger the magma, the more the PGEs that they can scavenge. And so, very, very simplistically, the Rottenstone magma, that is a significant source. And we haven't found the source yet. We have found another sill-like body, that being the Bay Island Trend. And we think we're on the verge of identifying another one at the, in the area of the Trombley-Olson claims. So, I think we're on our way. I mean, it takes time and it takes capital, obviously, but I think the good potential to replicate these historic grades, because we do know now that this is a very large magmatic system.
And so, yeah, as a nickel bull and an investor in Fathom, I like what you're saying. But this is so obviously this is not just discovering more pods, but also there is a chance of finding this feeder system or the source of these pods as well.
I think so. Yeah. No. We did. I think we're a little bit smarter than we were 2018 and even pre 2021 when we updated that technical report. We were using terms like a string of pearls and multiple pods, and if there's one Rottenstone which was believed to only be 50 to 60,000 tons, is there another one? I mean, this one outcropped at surface. I mean, it's stuck up like a pimple 10 meters above surface, and there aren't any other Rottenstone deposits sticking out of the ground, so they're going to be subsurface. And are there others? Yeah, I think there are, but they are going to have this common source, and where that is, that remains to be seen. But in the process of finding that, we will come across other pods, if to use that term, and pods are actually geologic traps. You have to have the perfect conditions for these deposits to do their thing, and the bigger the structural trap, the bigger the potential deposit. And depending on how much sulfur gets into the magma when this thing is doing its thing, will determine ultimately what the grade will be. But we now know that the structural trap that's host to the Bay Island Trend, I mean, it's a minimum of 300 meters in strike. So, and we think we understand how and why that trap is located where it is, and we can follow this perfect lithological contact that we feel now is actually an unconformity. So if this is the favorable horizon, this is where we're going to focus our exploration efforts to find more of these isolated deposits. But ultimately, again, there's a very, very large magmatic system that has a route into the crust. Just where is that original vent? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's tantalizing. I can't help but ask as a follow up here. I mean, obviously, it's going to be kind of a varying degrees of confidence in terms of your targets, but you overlay grav with mag and that conductivity when you can get there. But how many potential pods, potential targets, isolated deposits? How many targets do you have on your list right now that could end up being another variant of Rottenstone or another economic deposit, given appropriate exploration?
Yeah, well, we were, we did a soil geochemical program in 2018, and that was a follow up to some soil geochemistry that had been done in 2002. And there's been some Geological Survey of Canada projects with respect to biogeochemistry, some till analysis, and this is all part of this was part of the boring stuff. Just going through all of that. But when we did our soil geochem program in 2018, and then we followed up with a pretty extensive program in 2021, at that time, the Trombley-Olsen claims was still out of bounds, so we didn't go inside that particular area. But we were starting to understand that, nickel, chrome, magnesium, cobalt, and copper, it was elevated in soils in areas well removed from the Rottenstone deposit. And then when we did get the Trombley-Olsen claims and we went in there and did our soil geochemistry in the fall of 2022, I mean, it just lights up like a house on fire. When you look at everything that we've done on the property thus far, which still amounts to probably less than 10% of the 90,000 hectares, this Trombley-Olsen claim area is bright red. to use the brighter the colors, the better the values. So soil geochemistry is going to work. It's a tremendous instrument to get you into the ballpark, and then we've been relying on the results of the 2008 BHEM survey. We've done our own gradient mag survey over the entire 90,000 hectares. So there's lots of additional targets out there to be found. I mean, the area that we have covered with soil geochemistry, we have a lot of targets within it. But as we continue the process, more and more of these, I'm confident, will pop up. But to put sort of a shorter time frame on it, right now at the Albert Lake project, I feel that the historic Rottenstone deposit itself has been offset by a fault. And we recognize this fault. We've been able to map this fault. And I think there's a footwall offset of the Rottenstone deposit that's a little bit deeper, probably 250, 300 plus meters below surface. But we've had, borehole EM sort of on either side of the historic Rottenstone deposit at depth, and we're seeing conductivity build up as we get a little bit deeper down. So there's a very, very compelling target at the historic Rottenstone deposit itself. If it is offset by a fault and it has that type of grade, well, that would be a fantastic discovery. The Trombley-Olsen claims with this incredibly robust, soil anomaly, 743 ppm nickel in soils, over a gram platinum palladium in soils. That is a tremendous target, and that's immediately, 2 kilometers south of the historic Rottenstone deposit. Geophysical surveys this past summer have identified a very, very strong conductor that has a strike of 450 meters, and we've modeled it. It's coincident with gravity inversions. There's something of higher density and very conductive at a depth of 300 meters below surface. One of the drill holes I was involved in 2000, we probed it with the borehole EM back in the day, and we've since had some people go through the data yet again, and there's an incredible off-hole anomaly at 300 meters down this particular drill hole. So there's something very, very intriguing developing on the eastern flank of this very, very robust soil geochemical anomaly within the Trombley-Olson Claims area. 4.5 kilometers south of the historic Rottenstone deposit, an area that we call the Dime. We intersected 13 meters of ultramafic rock. And interesting enough, there was up to 0.5% nickel in the ultramafic with very minimal sulfide. So this, if the sulfide's in around 1%, and you're getting 0.5% of nickel out of this ultramafic with only 1% sulfide, that's potentially a very, very high metal tenor, similar to, Rottenstone. The Rottenstone metal tenor is anywhere from 7 to 9%. Metal tenor being the amount of nickel in 100% sulfide. So this is a very, very intriguing target. So, we feel we have a methodology now, and so I've mentioned Rottenstone itself, the Trombley-Olson, the Dime. There's at least half a dozen other areas that have caught my attention that are in need of drilling, and I shouldn't say drilling, eventually drilling, but another round of surface work, and then get it to the drill targeting stage.
And it's hard not to get excited. I mean, like you say, you have this working, proven, data-driven geological thesis and exploration thesis that now is going through that iterative process of creating new targets based on successful past targets. I mean, when you say you've got half a dozen targets like that, it's a very, very interesting thing. So I can't help but ask. I mean, for me, so I've been following your story, for a couple of years now, and when I heard that you had Gochager, you've had, so Albert Lake, Fathom's had that since your inception. Gochager comes along maybe a year ago, and so this is the question I can't help but ask, like, oh my gosh, like Albert Lake is this super exciting project. What the heck, how the heck did you end up putting that in the back seat and switching gears to Gochager? I mean, maybe we should just talk about Gochager. How does that attract your attention so much that it makes you want to put Albert Lake on the back burner?
It hasn't really been put on the back burner. It's purely timing. Going back to that previous comment I made, we were trading at 4.5 cents, and things were getting a little bit desperate, and we got to keep things moving here, and so Gochager came along, and it's helped us out tremendously from market cap and everything else. It gave us a bit of a buzz in the market, which was great. And we've been able to we spend a lot of time marketing, and we're very, very careful about how we go about this process, but is better than having one story. And in some respect, we've kind of de-risked what was just a one pony stable there for a little while. But by no means has Albert Lake been put on the back burner, because again, what I want to do, what we want to do, excuse me for saying what we want to do is demonstrate that both projects are developing nickel caps, and I think the data collected thus far is pointing us in that direction. So the challenge now becomes raising enough money to work on both, which is exactly what we want to do. I think there's a quicker path to a resource at the Gochager Lake deposit because one already exists. And it was defined from here to here to there and down to this depth. And we've proven that it's deeper than that depth, and it's further along strike. We've continued just the geophysics that we've done ourselves. We know that that is now, so if the original 4.3 million tons was this sandbox, we're presently playing with a much larger sandbox. So I think we can go about putting tons and grade together much faster at Gochager Lake than we can at Albert Lake. But, for instance, if we hope to raise sufficient capital that we'll be drilling at both properties in the new year. And if this 400-meter zone of conductivity at the Trombley-Olson claims, if we suddenly have two tremendous problems on our hands, and we just can't get to drilling fast enough at both of them. So again, it just is what you can do with the amount of money that you're able to raise, and being cognizant of not just completely blowing up the capital structure as well. So a challenge, but by no means have we backburnered the Albert Lake project. I mean, that's where this all started for me. So
Yeah, no, fair. I appreciate that pushback. I appreciate that. And I'll say that having the problems you have, I think the saying these days are champagne problems, right? It's not a worse things in the world than having two very exciting projects. So maybe just for Gochager, I mean, does it be, so it's a different system presumably, and you can correct me at any time because I'm not a geo obviously and you are, but I mean, does it's a different system, but does it behave? I mean, is it a very accurate or close analog to Albert Lake, or how do they differ in terms of what you're seeing? Like you talk about geochem and all the rest in terms of data acquisition. How are they similar? How are they different?
I think what we're going to find out is they're going to be remarkably similar in some respects. The one thing that's actually, let me back up just a little bit. So the intrusive as we know it at the Gochager Lake project is bigger than any of the intrusives that we're dealing with at the Albert Lake project at the moment. And at Albert Lake, it would appear that these things are horizontal in their sort of configuration. So they used the term sills earlier, and that's very accurate. So these are a conduit within the sediments, and it's oozing its way through the sediments. And then if there's a trap, well, that magma gets stuck in the trap, and then a deposit forms. At Gochager, it would appear now that we have a intrusive body that is more mafic in composition than ultramafic. And we feel that this is a dynamic intrusive. So there's several phases of this intrusive, and we're starting to recognize that a coarser grained component of the intrusive at Gochager Lake is possibly the more favorable phase of the intrusive for mineralization. So again, it's vertical, and what we're dealing with at the moment at Albert Lake appears to be more sort of sub-horizontal and slightly different mafic versus ultramafic. But at Gochager, the hole that was drilled in 2018, the deeper we get, it seems it's becoming more ultramafic. So at Gochager, we're seeing isolated zones of this globular texture. We're seeing a very broad disseminated zone. The interstitial semi-massive to massive sulfide zones, these are the ones that are aligned in these vertically oriented chutes. And so just, we've got all the right textures at Albert Lake, and we're seeing all the classic magmatic textures at Gochager. So in that respect, they're very similar. And, we do know that we get some massive sulfide components at Albert Lake. I think we're on the verge of tapping into a nice massive sulfide pool at Gochager. So in that respect, they're similar. The age is the same. The host rock is slightly different. The actual magmatic intrusive is slightly different, but comparable and equally upside potential at both of them.
I think this is a natural time to ask then, and I'm going to have follow-up questions here, but I think I'll just have to have you back on. We can chase those rabbits then. I mean, what are you? This is a question that maybe was broached kind of tangentially earlier, but what are you doing differently? Like Gochager, Albert Lake, Rottenstone, lots of decades and decades. I mean, almost a century when it comes to Albert Lake in terms of exploration. What have you done differently in terms of what data do you have that past operators did not, and what new thesis are you bringing to bear that you think will lead to success where others couldn't quite get their hands around that prize?
Well, I think at the Albert Lake project, this isn't criticism. It's potentially a junior exploration company. You raise money, you're at the mercy of the drill bit. I mean that's just unfortunately the way this business goes. But we've been able to, with the luxury of a big raise, we've been able to sort of step back and do some mapping, do the soil geochemistry, and develop targets. And a classic example, if the borehole EM is an absolute must. I said that earlier, and it has been incredibly successful at both projects. Just to tell you a little story. So, I talked about the drilling that we did in the bay, where we intersected that, the nice intersection of ultramafic that contained some of the best. Well, it was the best mineralized zone I'd seen drilled out there. That dates back to my original involvement in 1999. And so we wanted, there's an island near this bay, and it was a summertime, and we wanted to drill a hole back towards what turned out to be hole 21, where we made this discovery. And we knew it was just going to be a pilot hole. If we got lucky, we might get into something. But we were drilling it out towards this intersection in hole 21. And we drilled and we drilled and we drilled, and eventually just said, okay, we're going to stop this hole because it was barren. It was absolutely barren. There was absolutely nothing in this drill hole that would get you at all enamored or interested or anything. In goes the borehole EM. And my buddy who's been helping me out and overseeing all of this, I think it was a Friday afternoon, and he was at the pub and he said, Ian, you won't believe the response that we have in hole 33. We've got a tremendous conductor above the drill hole. And so, I think that kind of answers your question. Is we're using borehole EM, which had never really been used systematically before. And just to further up on that story is, we got back out there in the wintertime and started drilling more holes in the bay and then back onto the big island. And that's how we found the 300 plus meters of this nickel mineralization, albeit lower tenor than the historic Rottenstone. So borehole EM has been tremendous. And you can actually, you can drill a hole. For instance, if we had drilled that hole, say it was in the wintertime and it was a little bit closer, we would have immediately, that's real-time information. We could have just kept the drill there. We could have spun the drill a few degrees and just go after that conductor. So that's the luxury of borehole EM. And Gochager Lake. I mean, it's just, we know that these semi-massive to massive sulfides, we know they contain nickel. They respond beautifully to the borehole EM, and that's pointing us to zones of conductivity. And we've identified numerous conductive features with the borehole EM at the Gochager Lake project. So that's been something that we've been able to do that historically has never been done. And we are the beneficiaries of this tremendous airborne survey that was flown in 2008. And then there was multiple recommendations for the company to do additional work, but they were busy working on a project in Ontario, and so they just returned everything to the vendor, the data included. And we've since accumulated all of that data, and we've gone through it. We recognize there's additional Gochager Lake targets in the 22,000 hectares that we now have. So now it's time to get out there, do the grunt work first, get the boots on the ground, do some soil geochemistry, do the prospecting, do the mapping, do the follow-up ground geophysics. Then we have drill targets. So hopefully we can generate and the capital required to do that, and then allow ourselves the time to go about it in this very, very systematic and I think very, very rewarding process.
This has been a very enlightening conversation for me, but we'll probably have to point this to the end here. I'll have to just stifle some follow-up questions I have kind of percolating in my brain, but maybe just, as I said, to kind of point us to the end. I mean, right now, assays are outstanding. So you have, we're within a month, a few weeks, right, of whenever the lab goes back to you. What are you, so I guess, where are these assays coming from? And then what are you hoping to see from them in terms of, what are you hoping to see from them?
Yeah, well, so we press release a couple of weeks ago. So the 7 holes that we drilled at Gochager, just over 2,000 meters, that's all been completed. We're not doing any more exploration in 2023 at either project. So we're waiting on those assay results. In the news release, there was some imagery of some of the core that we have intersected, and one in particular where we're pointing to the coarse disseminated pentlandite that's occurring in the core. Pentlandite is nickel. And I think in that news release, there's an image of the polished half section of drill core that came out of 23003. In that, I'm pointing out the coarse disseminated pentlandite. So there are going to be zones within this that I think are going to be very favorable with respect to nickel assays. But importantly, the higher grade material, which I think is going to be higher grade material, it's all captured within this disseminated halo. So we tend to lose sight of things. Gochager Lake, and you've got a global resource. I'm just being very speculative here. And wishful thinking. We got a lot of work ahead of us. But if there's 25 million tons of 0.6 nickel, of something that's near surface, that's coming out of the ground. That's it's not going to be us that's going to be doing that. We'll we continue to have conversations with all the big boys, and we're the farm team at the moment. We're on the radar. We continue to engage with them, but that's where I think these results, and it was only 7 holes. 18002, which was a drill hole drilled in 2018, another example of a drill hole that was a bit of a duster, but the borehole EM went down there and said, hey, we've got something tremendous off hole left and below the drill hole. Well, our hole 10 hit that modeled plate and intersected semi-massive to massive sulfide. So we know that these semi-massive to massive sulfides are nickel bearing. So I think it bodes well for what's going to be coming out of these upcoming results.
Yeah, excellent. I can't help but ask. You talk about the big boys, right? At what point? Assuming front foot forward, you're acting from a position of strength. You raise funds well, et cetera, et cetera. When do those conversations become favorable to you? When is the right time? Presumably, like you say, you are not going to become the operator of either of these. You'll JV or sell them. When's that sweet spot for you as the current owner to make that transaction?
Well, yeah, I think our strategy is that point is from a position of strength. We're doing well here. We're sort of bucking the trend with respect to where we are share price wise and compared to some of our other peers. So if we can carry this momentum and continue to demonstrate that we have 2 very much emerging, let's think big here, nickel caps. we don't want to do that too soon. Again, I think it's um, it's going to play out. There'll be a lot of things that might be beyond our control, but ideally, as a shareholder, if I can be selfish here, the higher the better.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think I've been around this business long enough that if you jump in bed a little bit too soon and you're at the mercy of how they go about things, it's potentially not a necessarily good thing for the company or its shareholders. So I think it's a difficult question to answer.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think the common denominator here would be preferably from a position of strength.
Hmm. No, fair. It's a very speculative, hypothetical question with a lot of unknowns yet to be discovered, right? So two final questions, right? So 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, we have assays, so that's kind of a neat little catalyst people can look forward to. You have your winter drill campaign that will be headed up as things freeze over, as you say, December, January, Q1 start. Maybe just tell us how many targets are you targeting with that drill campaign? Maybe that's my last question I'll have for you before I ask you final thoughts.
Yeah, that question came up just over the weekend with a colleague of mine. Is okay. Well, where are you going to drill it? um, I use the sandbox analogy at Gochager Lake. We know that within this area we're going to get mineralization, um, but the way things are developing right now, we have probably, let me see, number 4, possibly 9, 10, and 8. Those are holes that came up too short. What we know now is they've come up a bit too short. There's something, again, with the borehole EM, this would have been, sort of a real time luxury if we'd had the budget. Well, hey, let's not move the drill off.
Hmm.
Let's wait till we see the borehole EM results, and we should keep going. So there's probably an additional, minimum 500 meters of drilling that needs to be done purely on extending existing drill holes.
Hmm.
So we've got to go. I'd like to drill a deep hole in this area for 2 reasons. Hopefully, aiming it at something that's very, very conductive, but again, it provides a tremendous platform for the borehole EM to do its thing. We've had success at the zone of conductivity 400 meters to the northeast, a geologic success. There's gabbro, there's semi-massive to massive vein stockwork type things occurring there, and there's a strong associated borehole EM anomaly. So that is a target. And what I see ourselves doing is cutting some grid and doing surface TDM surveys over other additional targets that aren't too far away. I'd like to drill some holes there. The Mall Lake nickel occurrence, 10 kilometers to the southeast. 1.1% nickel over 8 meters, drilled in 1967. Not a boot on the ground until our guy was there a couple of weeks ago. So that's a fascinating target. So there's no shortage of things to do.
That's great. No, and that's that's a good problem to have as an explorer. I mean the embarrassment of riches or the multitude of targets makes this a very, very, very interesting story to me. But I think I was going to cap it at an
Yeah.
hour, so I've already proven myself wrong there.
Well, thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah, no, ditto here. I know I've enjoyed it. It's been a great, great conversation. I guess I'll let you have the final thought, though. Final words, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, no, we're as a company we're excited. You use the term champagne problems. Yeah, no, we've got we've got 2 fantastic projects. Just a bit of a shout out to our project manager Vanessa and we work with Terralogic Exploration. They are tremendous members of the team, and I'm pleased that we've caught the attention of some nickel experts out there, and it's encouraging that we're actually having conversations with I use the term big boys. We've had some discussions with the Valets, the Glencores, the Rios of the world, and we're starting to get a little bit of traction with some intermediaries as well. So it's a story that's on the radar, and it's up to us to keep it going. And I feel very, very confident that we can.
Hmm. Well, that's it for today, I think. CEO Ian Fraser, Fathom Nickel. They've got assays in weeks and another whole very exciting drill campaign in just a few months. And I look forward to having you back on my show. But for now, good to talk to you and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.